faces, how steady are consumers despite all of the pressures on inflation that they're feeling. So a lot of signals coming from banks.
That was Julia Coronado, founder and president of Macro Policy Perspectives.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Bitwarden Password Manager, designed to help empower travelers with access to secure logins from any device wherever they are. Available at bitwarden.com.
The Social Security Trust Fund is set to run out of money by 2032, according to the program's latest annual report. We've known about this funding problem for years, 41 to be exact. And yet, the deadline keeps inching closer with no action from Congress. Labor economist Catherine Ann Edwards wrote about this for Bloomberg, and she pointed to the gig economy as one weak spot in the way Social Security is structured and a potential source of at least a partial solution to its funding problems. Catherine joins us for more about how Social Security works for those who are self-employed. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, Catherine, can you first of all tell us how the Social Security program works right now if you're self-employed, and how it works for the companies that contract with self-employed individuals?
Yes, if you are self-employed and you do not have an employer, so think about it as you don't get a W-2 at the end of the tax year. You pay both sides, the employer and employee side of the Social Security tax. For the Social Security old age program, that's 6.2% on the worker side and 6.2% on the employer side. You pay both. And then, of course, you pay both sides of Medicare as well.
So that's basically what Congress has dubbed the self-employment tax, right? You're paying everything.
Yeah, you pay all components when you're self-employed, and it is a not small tax to have on what many people consider to be a key pipeline to starting your own business, is starting out as self-employed and then becoming profitable enough that you're able to hire people and incorporate as a business.
So yeah, initially the idea is that this is a way to build your own business, but we have the rise of the gig economy. So things have changed, haven't they, compared to when these ideas and these taxes were structured?
Yeah, so the self-employment tax of paying both sides of the employer-employee side of Social Security, that was set in 1983. If you fast forward into the 2000s, we start to see the rise of something called misclassification, when workers who would be hired as an employee are instead hired as an independent contractor. And this saves the employer the burden of having to follow regulations that apply to their employees. And then it also saves them the Social Security tax and the unemployment insurance tax, the other payroll tax, that because they are not employees, they don't have to pay the Social Security taxes on them. And this idea of misclassification isn't that these are people who struck out on their own to start their own business, but people who are looking for a job, and instead of getting an employment contract, they get an independent contractor contract. And this, there's research from the Treasury Department that over a 15-year period to kind of kick off this century, most of the growth of self-employment was coming through independent contractors who were probably misclassified.
Catherine Ann Edwards is a labor economist and host of the Optimist Economy podcast. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And in the second part of my conversation with Catherine, she proposes that we tax the companies that use independent contractors. You can hear part 2 later this morning in our podcast feed or by visiting marketplace.org. In Los Angeles, I'm Nova Safo with the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.
MedEvidence and WJCT present Can We Edit Genes to Lower Cholesterol? A free lunch and learn with Dr. Michael Korn and Dr. Mitchell Rothstein. Wednesday, July 22nd at WJCT Studios. Registration at wjct.org/events. The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning and welcome to First Coast Connect. I'm Ann Schindler. Today, a lawsuit accusing the city of pickpocketing cash from the Jacksonville Aviation Authority. Reporter Nate Monroe explains just how he got here and what it means for both sides if the case moves forward. Then, the nation's oldest city elects its first black mayor. We sit down with her to discuss her rise through the city ranks and what it means to lead a city with a difficult racial history. And the gift of song, literally, River City Chorus performs as part of a 3-part charity benefit this weekend. Join the conversation. Give us a call on air at 904-549-2937 or head to firstcoastconnect.org where you can find all the ways to connect with us. Stick around. We'll be back right after the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Kristen Wright. Oil prices are higher today following the latest U.S. attacks against Iran. U.S. Central Command says American forces hit about 140 Iranian targets on Saturday and dozens more yesterday. They included coastal radar sites, missile and drone capabilities, and small boats. It followed more Iranian attacks on commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. NPR's Hadil Al-Shalchi reports on market reaction.
The price of the benchmark global oil jumped more than 4% after markets opened. That brought the barrel to $79, a 9% spike from its price before the U.S.-Israeli war with Iran started in February. Roughly 20% of the world's oil supply passed through the key international waterway. Kepler, a data and analytics company that tracks global commodity and shipping markets, said that crossings through the Strait of Hormuz dropped to 22 ships last week, and almost 85% drop from the pre-war traffic. The status of the ceasefire talks is unknown. They were supposed to continue after the funeral of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, which ended last week. Hadil Al-Shalchi, NPR News, Istanbul.
Congress returns to Washington from their July 4th recess today. The death of South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham is a sudden major shift. Graham was elected to the Senate in 2002 after serving in the House. He was a close ally of President Trump and known as a strong advocate in U.S. foreign policy. NPR's Claudia Grisales reports the senator had just gotten back from Ukraine.
To start, he was chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, which will need to recalibrate their plans. And of course, he had this outsized role in foreign policy. Lawmakers in both chambers say they're now anxious to tackle a Russia sanctions bill that Graham, in his last press conference on Friday, said the White House had signed off on. And he also said he was more optimistic than ever that they had found a formula to end Russia's war with Ukraine.
The medical examiner says Graham likely died from a tear in his aorta. The Red Cross is declaring a national blood emergency, citing a sharp drop in donations. NPR's Rob Stein reports.
The Red Cross is declaring the emergency because donations have been falling since the end of May, causing the national blood supply to drop by about 25% by the end of June. Blood donations often decline this time of year because regular routines get disrupted by summer travel, and blood drives at places like schools and colleges go on hiatus. At the same time, demand for blood increases because of a spike in injuries from car crashes and more people participating in activities like biking, hiking, and boating. And that's what's happening again this year. The Red Cross says there's a deficit of about 3,500 units of blood each week. Rob Stein, NPR News.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Good morning. You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. I'm Stephen Ponson. Right now it is 9:04. The first of 6 Jacksonville Sheriff's Office Town Hall meetings kicks off today with Sheriff T.K. Waters and police commanders. The town halls will be held in each of the city's 6 police districts, updating residents on their neighborhoods. All town halls start at 6:30 in the evening. Today's is at Trinity Baptist Church on Hammond Boulevard for residents of District 5, which includes Baldwin, Newtown, Northwest Jacksonville, and Riverside. The second is tomorrow at the Church of 1122 Mandarin Campus on Losco Road for residents in District 3, which includes Mandarin and the South Side. The full Sheriff's Office Town Hall schedule is at jaxsheriff.org. Florida's proposed homestead exemption amendment could put public hospitals in a pinch. They rely on hundreds of millions of dollars in local property taxes to care for low-income and uninsured patients, but the ballot measure could minimize that revenue and limit how local governments can spend it. The head of the Safety Net Hospital Alliance of Florida, Justin Senior, warns what could happen to patient care across the state if that money disappears.
It's important in our state that no one have to leave the state of Florida to receive health care, but you do, if you're put under pressure, have to make decisions about what type of care you're going to continue providing and the level of care that you can provide, but it does have an impact and it could potentially force some difficult choices.
Sinor says making it do with less tax revenue could also ultimately mean fewer healthcare options for local communities. Right now, temperatures are in the lower 80s in downtown Jacksonville.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the estate of Joan B. Kroc, whose bequest serves as an enduring investment in the future of public radio and seeks to help NPR be the model for high-quality journalism in the 21st century. This is NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Welcome to First Coast Connect. I'm Ann Schindler. Today, the woman ushering the ancient city into a new era of leadership. We sit down with Mayor-elect Cynthia Garris, the first former city employee elected commissioner, soon to be the oldest city's first black mayor. But first, a lawsuit that will challenge the limits of city power is taking shape. The Jacksonville Aviation Authority is preparing to take the city to court for allegedly pickpocketing the airport's cash reserves. Here to tell us why this is happening now and what's at stake is Nate Monroe. He is executive editor of the Florida Trib. Nate, good morning.
Good morning, Ann.
Thanks for coming in this Monday. So you reported Friday that the Jacksonville Aviation Authority has drafted a lawsuit and the board is going to vote this Thursday on whether to file it. What does it say?
You know, it's a 43-page complaint, so it's quite lengthy, and it's I call it like a speaking lawsuit. It's the kind of lawsuit that when you read it, it feels like it was intended to be sort of quoted, and it's actually pretty remarkably outraged. This all kind of relates to what has become a kind of years-long fight over the Aviation Authority's budget and its budgeting authority, and whether the city council can actually budget and sort of force the authority to spend money on priorities or on things that the Aviation Authority doesn't want to spend it on. And so the lawsuit, in essence, accuses the city, and more specifically the city council, of mismanaging its own financial affairs, and in turn looking to have somebody else, in this case the Aviation Authority, pay its bills.
And so the council is accused of overstepping its authority, essentially ordering the illegal use of funds, because the money that's at stake here is sort of cash reserves that the airport authority says there are very stringent limits on, like how they can spend it, what they can use it for, and that the council is misdirecting them.
Yes, the Aviation Authority has somewhere in the neighborhood of about $300 million cash on hand, which is a lot of money. Now they say that this is common, that airports tend to have this kind of cash on hand. And one council member in particular, the now council president, Nick Howland, has for a couple of years now been looking at how to get the Aviation Authority to kind of buy into some city priorities. Some of them aviation adjacent or at least related, some of them a little bit less so. One of the discussions that they had was about whether there was any way that JAA could pay for a new jail, for example.
That he also explored the idea of having them make a sizable charitable donation to the Kids Hope Alliance. Some of those he acknowledged, were not in line with the Federal Aviation Authority regulations. We actually spoke to Nick Howland when he was assuming the presidency on this program last month, and we asked him about it. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
I quickly learned that a lot of those ways I proposed would have violated, had we spent the money, FAA's revenue diversion law. But there's also a whole part of the law with permissible uses. And some of those are infrastructure investment that might lead into an airport. Others are aviation spend on airport. And I started getting lots of emails from people from multiple administrations, Deegan, Payton, Delaney, saying, hey, we've encountered these issues in the past. with JAA, there are opportunities to accelerate growth at Cecil.
So a couple of things I want to note there. I mean, one is he acknowledged that his initial proposals would have violated, federal revenue diversion laws. But he also, after those were shot down, he proposed a couple of other things that were also kind of out of line with the typical expenditures of the airport authority. $25 million to help raise the power lines. JEA has to raise the power lines over the St. Johns River to allow larger boats. And then this expansion of Cecil Aviation's, the FSCJ's Cecil program. It's basically a aviation program on the campus of Cecil. And so he has suggested other ways to spend this money beyond the ones that have already been shot down. Do they stand a better chance?
That's a good question, and probably a closer question of law than your friendly neighborhood editor is in a position to answer. I think where things are is that JAA has had discussions with the FAA and feels pretty solidly that the FAA is kind of on its side, so to speak, that the city needs to back off, let the aviation authority handle its affairs. The aviation authority, for its part, would say that it has invested a lot of time and resources into Cecil and development at Cecil, which for listeners, the aviation authority runs 4 airports. Cecil is one of them and has one of the longest runways on the East Coast, and I think is viewed as having a lot of opportunities. And so their story is, just be happy with what we're doing. We're doing a great job.
Yeah. And they want to be able to do it with some autonomy. The other thing I want to ask you about is where he noted that he's been contacted by a number of mayors, current and former mayors, saying, yeah, we kind of have had this problem, sort of indicating some level of support. We actually have the Mayor Deegan on tomorrow. He says that she was one of the people that he heard from saying, we've encountered these issues in the past. What do we think the mayor's stance is in terms of either the current council president's interference with JAA or what she would like to see happen at Cecil?
I think that I would not be surprised if she were more aligned with Nick Howland on this particular issue than people might assume. And Nick Howland is not the first or only person to have hold the view that the aviation authority could do more with Cecil. And so it would not surprise me if that were the case.
But you've reported that, he may not be the only one, but he certainly has been kind of the most intense, it appears. Yes. And you've reported that, the board, that staff at the airport authority have complained of him bullying, threatening, that there's been this real intense animosity, kind of sending emails to each other saying, this guy won't quit. And he, in turn, has gone to the state legislature and essentially successfully lobbied to pass laws that change the charter of the aviation authority.
Yes, he has been remarkably sort of dogmatic in his view that the aviation authority needs to be doing more, and is a bit of a dog with a bone and just won't let it go, and has apparently, intended or not, rubbed some aviation authority folks the wrong way. We have seen, as you referenced, we've reported on some email communications between Howland and the chair of the Aviation Authority Board, really kind of going at it. And this is all quite unusual for the city and one of its independent agencies.
And we should say Nick Howland has denied bullying or threatening anybody pretty vociferously. But in terms of autonomy, I want to ask you more broadly about that, because this aviation authority is created by the state as sort of a subsidiary or an agent of the state as opposed to of the city, but the city does have some oversight. Is this similar to other authorities? You've obviously done the most reporting in the city on JEA, another independent authority. There's also the Port Authority. These all are quasi-independent authorities, but then there appears to be this level of oversight that the council has.
Yeah, we use this term of art, independent authority, and the truth is, there's the way I've always viewed it, I think there is a spectrum. There is a spectrum of independence among and within these independent authorities. I think you take JEA, JEA is probably the kind of least independent of them. It is a board that is comprised entirely of appointees of the council and the mayor. The Port Authority Board, the Transportation Authority Board, the Aviation Authority Board, those are mixed boards. So those have boards that have a mix of city appointees and state appointees. And in the case of the Aviation Authority Board, that's a 7-member board. The governor actually appoints 4 of them. So the governor makes the majority of the appointments on that board. And, part of this lawsuit, and if this legal battle does indeed go forward, I mean, there's going to be an argument about whether the Aviation Authority has the power to hire its own attorney and whether this suing the city is kind of legal in its own right.
Because that's not a new question. I mean, this city is governed by a charter that basically formed the consolidated government of Jacksonville, the consolidated city-county government of Jacksonville, and there is essentially, theoretically, one attorney that makes decisions for all of the agencies. That's the Office of General Counsel. Yes, and
as far as I know, every general counsel who's ever had that job is very defensive and very protective of this structure, and is of the very strong view that it violates the charter for any of these authorities, including, at one time at least, this included the school board, the property appraiser, other elected officials, that it violates the charter if they want their own attorney and to take any sort of adverse action against the city. There are people who very strongly defend that structure. I'm not one of those people, but that has been a kind of foundational assumption for how things have worked here for a long time, and it's really rarely been tested.
I want to ask you about that in a minute, but we are talking to Nate Monroe. He's executive editor of the Florida Trib. He reported on Friday about a lawsuit that could be filed as soon as this week. The Jacksonville Aviation Authority suing the city of Jacksonville. If you'd like to join our conversation, you can reach us on air at 904-549-2937, or you can email comments or questions to First Coast Connect at wjct.org. We have a call from Tom on the west side. Good morning, Tom. Go ahead.
Yes. Good morning to y'all, too. I just want to say that, I'm just getting tired as a citizen and taxpayer in Duval County of our school board and our city council making so many bad decisions that just wind up in court and wind up costing us money in the inevitable settlements. We need better leadership in this city, and with Nick Howland as the current president of the city council, I'm not optimistic in that front.
Tom, thanks for your thoughts. The timing of this lawsuit, this potential lawsuit that's been drafted, is interesting because, of course, you say that this animosity has existed for a few years now between Nick Howland and the JAA, but this decision to now perhaps file a lawsuit is coming at the same time as Nick Howland takes control of the city council for the next year. He's the president. He will have considerably more input, one would imagine, into the budget process. What are they worried that it's important now to sort of plant the flag or seek this declaratory judgment from a judge?
Yeah, look, I think the timing is the Aviation Authority, I think, pretty explicitly acknowledges the timing in both the lawsuit and the resolution that it's asking its board to pass, saying, they fear that Howland can use the budget process as, a kind of, kangaroo court to really put the Aviation Authority in a bad spot, put them under the spotlight, make them have some torturous long, budget hearing and nitpick things. I think the timing is very deliberate.
Would we expect that the general counsel is going to weigh in if and when this lawsuit is filed to say whether it's even possible for JAA to sue the city?
My assumption, given the many general counsels who have held this position in the past and who, in their views on this, I think that the general counsel will argue that the Aviation Authority does not have the power to hire its own attorney.
That came up in a previous era when this Duval County School Board was seeking to hire its own attorney. It wanted to put a sales tax referendum on the ballot. The city council sort of refused to do it, even though it appeared that they were obligated legally to place it on the ballot once the school board had voted for it. And so there was this question, are they allowed to hire their own attorney? That question actually went to a judge outside of the city, and he decided that they could hire an attorney. How is that different or similar?
I think it's probably a trickier question than it seems on paper. The school board, the argument then was that school board members are elected officials and they are actually constitutional officers. So those positions are sort of derived from the state constitution, and their power is a state constitutional question. It's not a charter thing. The Aviation Authority Board, these are not elected officials. But I do think that, again, we talked about this kind of like spectrum of independence. The Aviation Authority Board is probably on the kind of more independent end of things. Again, the majority of its board is appointed by the governor. And so I think that it's probably a closer question. I'll say this. I mean, although this has rarely been tested, the 2019 episode, an exception, the Aviation Authority does have, I don't think it's crazy to say that this is a legitimate gripe. And their gripe is that, look, when we have an adversarial posture with the city council, they want us to do a thing we don't want to do that we think is illegal. We share an attorney, and look, the city council can fire the general counsel. The Aviation Authority cannot. And so almost by definition, the Aviation Authority is going to feel like the subordinate client in that situation and is going to feel like they're not getting the same kind of representation. That was certainly how the school board felt in 2019, and the general counsel took the city council's position, or took their side more or less in that dispute. This happens all the time. These independent authorities feel like the city gets to be heavy-handed because they get a closer and sort of better relationship with the general counsel, and they get kind of better representation.
I mean, the city council has kind of explained or it complained about that as well, saying that the mayor gets better representation because she's appointing the general counsel.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in terms of the budget aspect of this, one thing that's kind of interesting is that in addition to these expenditures that Nick Howland was calling for, that the JAA was concerned about, the council actually gave them an additional $13 million that they didn't ask for, and they say they didn't want. And some would argue, wow, here's this $13 million windfall. What's the problem? Why is JAA refusing that money or saying that that's an impingement on their freedom, essentially, because they're getting this big chunk of money?
That's what I think they would say, at least in part, is if we do this and go along with it, we're setting this precedent and expectation that you can force us to spend money on things that we don't want to spend. Their position is, look, we don't really take money from the city. And this kind of gets at the independence issue again. We don't get city outlays. We're kind of you can kind of set us in motion and let us run our affairs, and we're really just asking you to let us do that.
One of the things that the Aviation Authority has said, and I think the FAA has kind of backed them on, is this idea that the priorities of somebody running an airport are different than political priorities, and that if you give the city too much power in influencing how that money is spent, you're going to have things perhaps like big welcome signs as opposed to reinforcing the asphalt on a taxiway. That the priorities of an airport are going to be specifically geared towards things like safety and expansion of what they do, as opposed to in any way promoting a message or trying to be, a representative of the city itself.
Right. And this kind of dynamic has come up in other contexts in the city too. This has happened with JEA in the past. Investment banks, Wall Street, they tend to look very warily on what any kind of, sort of political influence in these authorities' kind of budget process. It makes them concerned that these authorities may, not honor debt obligations if it becomes inconvenient to do so. I'm not saying that's necessarily the case here, but that kind of push and pull and that sort of dynamic has happened. And investment banks have actually flagged this particular dispute and said, hey, we're just kind of planting a flag here to say this could be a thing for you.
Yeah, they're raising concerns about the interventionist policies of the city council, right, saying that JAA's operational autonomy, although it's safeguarded under Florida law, the council has this ability to kind of, have oversight and propose charter amendments that could really impact budget decisions for the aviation. And so they're saying if you're going to be an investor, you need to be wary of that fact.
Right.
Yeah. So what happens this week that you're going to be watching?
So the Aviation Authority called a special meeting on Thursday and is going to vote on this. They're going to vote on a resolution that sort of is the underpinning and justification for filing the lawsuit. And, they're going to vote on, I think it's kind of an omnibus resolution in the sense that it's, approving hiring an outside law firm, approving moving forward with the lawsuit and sort of doing it. And I would say, for what it's worth, barring something unexpected happening, I don't think that Aviation Authority staff puts this sort of thing forward without having a good sense that the board is probably on board with this.
Yeah.
So I would expect that that'll pass.
All right. And then perhaps next would go to the city's general counsel for some sort of, or
I think it goes to court. And I think that, that's what happened in the school board case.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will be watching your reporting. Nate Monroe is executive editor of the Florida Trib. We've got a link to his reporting on our website. Nate, thanks so much for coming in today.
Thank you, Ann.
All right. Up next, the nation's oldest city elects its first Black mayor. We sit down with her to discuss her rise through the city ranks and what it means to lead a city with a difficult racial history. Welcome back. In its 461-year history, St. Augustine has had just 4 Black city commissioners and 4 female ones. Cynthia Garris is the first who is both. The mayor-elect joins us now to talk about her place in ancient city history. Madam Mayor-elect, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So there's been a lot of attention to the fact that you are a woman elected mayor, also the first person of color mayor, but you're also a longtime city employee. And I think that in and of itself is extremely rare, if not unheard of. You have worked a variety of roles in city agencies, in city departments, and in county roles before coming to become a city commissioner. And I'm curious how that in particular will impact how you lead as mayor.
Well, that's correct. All of that is correct. First of all, I worked at the clerk's office from 1990 to 2000. And then I worked for the city from 2008 to 2021 as an employee. During that time at the city, I had various jobs, but the last job that I retired from was being the facilities coordinator. And with that job, I oversaw our city properties with the group called Facilities Operations. So people would call in, employees, residents, and tell me about a concern or something that was broken in our city corridor, and I would send the operations gentleman out to repair it.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned a lot about what we fixed and what we didn't fix, what we put a bandage on just to keep it operating, and what we actually spend a lot of revenue to repair.
Were there specific things like that experience showed you about gaps and what the city needs to address, problems that it needs to focus its funding on?
Yes, it did. It opened up a window for me to learn the budget, how the line items work, the money for the projects that we wanted to do, like redoing the dental building, which is it's over there by our Francis Field, and to operate it and to repair it so that when people rent the field, that they had that as a resource for the bathrooms.
It's like a bathroom. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a place for them to count money and do different things.
And also a historical building. It was the Robert Haling dentist building, right? That was relocated, the former.
Yes, yes. At once upon a time, it was.
Yeah,
Yes,
and he, of course, is a big figure in
yes.
city history as well.
Dr. Haling is the father of the civil rights. He's the one that seeked Martin Luther King to come to the city of St. Augustine.
Yeah, and suffered mightily for his activism as well. Badly beaten, and took a lot of personal risks. So, in your role working for the city, you were a parking attendant, you were a custodian before you were a facilities coordinator. Do you feel that it's important to have a connection with just kind of working class individuals? Because we recently had one of your colleagues on talking about affordability in the city, the fact that it's becoming harder to afford for ordinary folks to live there, that it's becoming much more of a tourist level economy in terms of the spending, the cost of going out to restaurants, all of that.
Well, St. Augustine is number 2 in the state of Florida to come to. First being Disney. We're never going to beat out Mickey Mouse. But it's history. People want to know history, and they want to know where it all began, like with the oldest schoolhouse, the oldest drugstore, the oldest jail, the old jail, and things of that nature. So people have a desire to come because as we get older, history is very important. And also, it has a history of a lot of, unfortunately, it doesn't have a great past with the whole thing at the Munson, the acid being poured in the pool.
During the civil rights movement.
The civil rights movement. And that was part of all of it being happening. And the children, the 4 teens that got the St. Augustine 4 that got arrested and their lives forever changed. They actually had felonies on their record their whole lives, even though they were minors at the time. And I didn't find that out until I had one of the ladies that's still alive, the last one that's still alive, coming to honor her at our city commission meeting for Black History.
Cora?
No, that's not Miss Tyson. That is, her name will come to me in a minute. She was Edwards. Her name is, I'll come back to that.
All right. You did have a welcome to office by Cora Tyson, though. Is that right?
Yes. Miss Tyson is amazing. Miss Tyson just turned 103 years old. She actually housed King, and she also fed him when he was there for the civil rights. She's very influential. She's her and Barbara Vickers as well. They're both 103. And Barbara Vickers lived across the street from Dr. Haling. So she is the reason why we have the monuments, the Foot Soldiers Monument in our plaza. She worked with some other community people to make that happen.
The history of St. Augustine has obviously always been its selling point. I think lately there's been much broader embrace of its difficult history, including its civil rights history. And that is what draws a lot of people nowadays to that area. There's tours specific to Black history in St. Augustine. There's a greater recognition. There's more plaques. There's more sites that have been recognized. Lately, particularly in this upcoming election, you started to hear the term over-tourism being used. And that is for people who live downtown. A lot of times we hear complaints about nights of lights, the intensity of that footprint, that annual couple months, of intense tourism. But all the time now, it's become a lot busier.
Well, it becomes a lot busier for 2 reasons. One is because anytime somebody comes to our charming city, they like it and they go home and pack up and they move here. So, and then they come here, and because when they came, they probably were limited to driving and so forth. And now that they have to drive the streets, then they start complaining about how it is living here because now they have more exposure on an everyday basis. The beauty about St. Augustine is that we pull together when it's important during hurricanes and things like that. My goal as the new mayor, I want us to pull together just because we can pull together. It's very important to know your community. It's very important to be visible. And during my term as a commissioner, I tried to go to everything possible just so people can know me and identify with me. I didn't just sit and just be a commissioner in name, and I promised that during that time period when I ran. And so sometimes I go in a place and I say, they don't know me, and they start saying Commissioner Garris, and now they're saying Mayor-elect. Because it's very important for people to have a certain trust for you because you're in a form of leadership. And it's very good to have compassion and to listen to people's concerns. We are put in those seats because people voted us in those seats. Fortunately for me, I didn't have to go through a voting this season. I was the only one qualified. And what that basically means is I was the only one that took all the necessary steps for that position. There was someone in the race
For mayor.
from a mayor when I got in the race, and they withdrew, and nobody else came. There was a window of a month that anybody could have came and ran against me. I heard 5 people were asked, and they all did not want to run against me because they know I had the qualifications to be the mayor. And so I respect the decision to say no. And I would have respected anybody's decision if they wanted to join me in the race because I was prepared. I got signs all around town, and I had moved forward. I had gotten donations because people trusted and believed that my leadership would be effective.
So I want to ask you, because we were talking a little bit before our conversation here about some blowback that has emerged. You know, there's been a lot of focus in the last couple of weeks on the fact that you are in this historic position, the first Black female mayor for the city of St. Augustine, a city that's 461 years old. And so it is a landmark moment. And it's also significant in the scope of the racial history of St. Augustine, which has been, as we touched on, incredibly troubled over the years. And yet, that fact, that historic moment, has also become a little bit of a stumbling block in some ways because people are now reacting to that or pigeonholing you in one way or another. And you're finding that that's something that is a message that you're trying to counteract now.
Yes. Well, one thing is, I was born Black, and I can't change that fact. But I was born here in St. Augustine. I attended school here in St. Augustine, but I also have some Northern background. I lived in a town called Newport, Rhode Island, and it's a tourist town similar to St. Augustine. It's just a northern town. And there, I didn't see signs that said colored only. I didn't see things that made me feel like I couldn't go into any place. So with that scope being a little different, I didn't have a lot of what people suffered here in the South. I didn't come back here and move back. I went to high school, but there wasn't any of that. It was already, it wasn't segregated anymore. People were going to school, and so I always looked at the world as a melting pot where everybody deserved to be relevant, regardless what race. And I heard King's speech about judge people by their character, and that hit my spirit. There's things that you hear that lock into your spirit, and I judge people on how they treat me. And I always treat people with kindness unless they show me that they shouldn't be treated with kindness, And so because of that, I feel like I hear everybody's concerns. And even being on the commission, it's like a scale. It's like, which way should you vote on something? It's a scale. If you don't think it feels right, then I don't vote for it. But if I feel like it's going to be beneficial to the residents, then I vote accordingly. This is a tourist town. It is people saying that we're overcrowded and things of that nature. There's a lot of land that has already been purchased. I heard somebody say that's campaigning, that have done the research, that over 400,000 homes and land has been purchased. So there's no slowing down the growth because we're going to keep growing. The only problem is these streets were not developed for this volume of traffic, and that's what we're facing. And that's why there's so much congestion, because the land was, a lot of it was like trees and woods, and now there's houses. So if you look at, there's a place that's over there by the Dollar General, I believe it's on Volusia. They have over 100 apartments in that one development. Mm-hmm. If you look at that purposely, if there's a couple moves in there, then that's going to be 2,000 cars on the road. So, and then if they got a teenager that drives, then that's 3,000 cars on the road. So people have to realize that we have to learn to leave a lot earlier than we plan to get somewhere, because we don't know. There's so much road construction. We went past a lot of it just coming here today. There's road construction. You got to schedule yourself to go somewhere so you're not frustrated when you leave your house.
It's interesting. The first female mayor of the city of St. Augustine presided over the closure of St. George Street in terms of making that a pedestrian-only walkway. Are there thoroughfares that you think would be more appropriate as pedestrian-only, given kind of the crush of traffic, the difficulty and the concerns about interactions between cars and pedestrians?
I think there's a lot of places downtown in our downtown corridor that could be walkable. I think at some point, because we just closed part of Spanish Street down probably about a year ago, because there was people that was driving through it. There was like an area of residents that lived on there, and those homes are like antique. Somebody crashed into one of the people's homes.
They're just like right on the edge of the street too.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so they were old houses, and the only thing, the blessing, that the lady was not in her bed, because it actually hit her bedroom. She was not in bed at the time. So we closed that area down after we had done some construction to redo the road. And I think that we probably at some point closed down maybe Hippolyta Street to just a trolley coming through, because cars come through and the sidewalks are even with the road. So people walk in the road because they can't tell the difference from the sidewalk and the road.
Yeah.
Because they're not looking downward. So I think at some point in the future, we'll make a lot of that area walkable, just so that we don't have the congestion. I think by the time that the Browdy's garage gets built, a lot of people, there'll be an overwalk over the highway that a lot of people would probably enjoy the stroll downtown. The businesses down in the West King Street corridor will probably get a lot of traffic. People have a choice to go to the east or to the west, and I think that will downsize some of the congestion as well.
And that Browdy's is at the corner of King Street and US 1. It's
Correct.
where the liquor store is or was and is now going to be a giant parking garage, right?
Yes, it's going to be a parking garage that the city's going to operate.
If you're just joining us, we were talking to Cynthia Garris. She is the mayor-elect of St. Augustine. She's going to be sworn in December 7th. If you'd like to join our conversation, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can email comments or questions for the mayor-elect at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. In terms of your place in history, I mean, I do want to talk a little bit about how you see it. You know, there were, as we mentioned, just before you, 3 Black city commissioners in the history of the city. In recent years, there was Errol Jones, who was a vice mayor and city commissioner for kind of in the the 2000s to 2012. Before that, Henry Twine, who was a famous civil rights leader himself in the 80s. And dating back to the very beginning, to 1902, there was one of the, he was the first Black city council or commissioner in St. Augustine. I think they were called aldermen back then. But he was named John Papino. He was actually shot in the face when he was serving as a councilman by a white marshal who was not prosecuted. And historian David Nolan from St. Augustine said basically that act of terror put an end to Black political office holding here for the next 7 decades. So,
Yes.
you know, the role of a commissioner and the role of being a Black commissioner does seem to take on a special significance given the history of racial terror in St. Augustine and just the infrequency with which Black elected officials have been in that seat.
Well, there's one thing that I just want to correct. The first one after that time period was Arnett Chase.
Okay.
Arnett Chase and Richard White was also a commissioner. So there was 4 men after the revolution. And then I was the first Black female to in 2022 when I became on the commission. I retired in 21. I walked out the door and started campaigning. And in 22, I had an opponent and I became the chosen one on the ballot, and I became mayor and got sworn in that December.
Yeah. And so how do you carry that?
I carry it because I have had an internal eye to see how the city operates, because I had to work with various departments and had to go into a lot of departments and talk about things. I had a lot of contact with people that were renting space from the city, leaseholders like at the Casa del Gago and different places. And when I first started, I was doing a lot of state building. I worked at the government house. I had worked at the government house as the custodian in the police department. And I had applied for various jobs prior to that. And I was told I was overqualified because I had a bachelor's and a master's degree. And then I was told they had a better fit person that already kind of knew their area. And so actually I prayed, because I'm a spiritual person. I prayed and asked God if he wanted me to humble myself when I overheard somebody saying a custodian position was open, to rise again. And it came back to my spirit that God wants me to move if the job made $25,000 a year. And so I had a coworker go down because I was working at the garage and I couldn't just leave and go down to personnel to get the paperwork. I asked someone that was getting off to go down and bring it back to me. And so they did. A gentleman named Ron, he brought it back, and also a transfer form because the job closed at 9 o'clock in the morning. And so anyway, after all that, I just turned to the last page to see what it paid, and it paid $25,100. And there's the 25,100% that God wanted me to do it. So the next day I went down and I interviewed for that job and got hired on the spot.
I guess I'm more asking about the role that you think it plays for you. I mean, I know that you've said that you've gotten some blowback for kind of being held up as the first Black female mayor of St. Augustine. Do you feel, though, that your ability to celebrate that moment or sort of that historic landmark is being hindered by the fact that you also want to representing all the people of St. Augustine?
I am getting some blowback because the first couple of interviews I had, they were geared to race, and I can understand why they would want to know because of the legacy of the South here in St. Augustine personally. I hear that why didn't I get voted on? Why was I the only one qualified? Why was am I DEI? I say put DIVA on that. If you're going to put any D's in it. But anyway, I feel like people are judging me and they don't know me. But everyone that does know me, they appreciate me. I mean, I went to the county, the chambers thing this week, and a lot of people came up and congratulated me and told me how excited they are. But the only people that are saying anything negative is apparently people that don't know anything about me. They have a small window on what's posted online about me. They don't know that I was the fixer for Mr. Markle when I worked at the courthouse for 10 years. They don't know that I even ran for clerk of court. I resigned from my position to make changes in that office. And 27,000 people voted for me, and they never knew my name prior to that election. And then I actually ran for the city commission seat that I hold right now in 2002 because I wanted to know why kids had to walk to the school bus in the street. You know, it's not safe. And then they had to stand on Masters Drive waiting for the bus, and that's one of the busiest streets in St. Augustine to travel down, and people are speeding down that street. That's why they end up later putting speed bumps all the way down. But I think my window is because when a person is elected to office, they spend the first probably year just trying to know who everybody is and what they do. And I don't have to do that because I've worked there and I know everybody and I know how the departments run. So that put me a step ahead of just getting to how the commission meeting runs. What is our problems? What is the most concentrating on the budget, where the revenue is going, getting the most we can get out of the tax dollars that we collect and not spending it foolishly.
I want to ask you about that because we are short on time. The property tax amendment that is coming to voters in November could have really profound impacts on every small city's budget. What are you expecting from that? How are you preparing?
Well, there is a lot of concern about that. And I try to look at everything from both angles. I can look at it that is we're going to have to make some cutbacks if it passes. We're going to have to reconjuggle the budget. This year will be fine because it won't go into effect until November, and it will go on the next year's thing that the property taxes will be, a homestead will go up to $150,000. It's been stuck at the same level for a long time, and people's value of their houses is going up. So, of course, that goes up.
Do you support the property tax cut?
I understand why people will vote yes on it.
Will you vote yes on it? I mean, is it something that you personally would support?
Well, I'll put it this way. I live in my grandmother's house that I own, and it was built in 1955. Do I want to pay taxes for that property that she paid off years ago? So as far as myself personally, I feel it would be a benefit for me, but I also have the ability and the responsibility as a person of government to understand why we need that revenue.
All right. Well, we're going to have to leave it there. She will be sworn in December. Mayor-elect Cynthia Garris of St. Augustine, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right. We'll be back in just a moment with a local chorus hosting free concerts for charity.
The Cummer Museum of Art and Gardens presents a summer concert featuring Jacksonville's own 10-piece salsa band, LPT, July 25th, 5:30 to 9 p.m. Tickets and information available at cummermuseum.org. Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. When people are hurt through no fault of their own, finding the who, what, when, where, why, and how that led to the accident is critical to proving the truth.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com.
Film at WJCT Studios presents The Fifth Step, the acclaimed National Theatre Live production starring Jack Loudon and Martin Freeman. Called raw, excruciating, and often alarmingly funny, this gripping new play was filmed live on London's West End. Join us Wednesday, July 15th at WJCT Studios. Doors open at 6:30, show begins at 7. Tickets and information at wjct.org/film.
Cape Verde, Haiti, and Curacao, just to name a few, have captivated soccer fans in this year's World Cup, even though they were the longest of long shots to win.
People like success. The underdogs, by definition, should not be successful. What gravitates people towards the underdog?
That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9.
The Trump administration continues its campaign to cast doubt on the election process by threatening top state election officials with criminal prosecution over alleged non-citizen voting. What does that mean for the midterms? That's on the next installment of our politics series, If You Can Keep It, on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Charity meets the arts this summer in the annual River City Chorus Concert Series. Here to tell us about it is Dale Choate, the director of the River City Chorus. Dale, welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We're also joined by Chelsea Wise. She's the director of Young Lives, the concert series charity recipient. Chelsea, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, Dale, you are director of River City Chorus. First of all, who is your audience and who are your members?
Our members are teachers, attorneys, bookkeepers, just different people in the community that come together for the love of singing.
And your audience. Who is your intended audience? Who are your regulars, so to speak?
Mostly people that love choral music singing, and some of them sing in choirs themselves. But often because of the venues we perform in, our churches, a lot of our audiences come from that particular church. But some returning audience members come from other churches as well.
And how would you describe your songbook? I mean, it looks like the music you choose tends and maybe be a factor of the venues that you perform in, that sometimes they seem to have a lot of like hymns, some patriotic music. How would you describe kind of your musical bent?
I think it's very diverse. There's a combination of sacred music as well as secular. We're doing anything from Joni Mitchell's Both Sides Now to Battle Hymn of the Republic.
And how long have you been singing?
I've been singing all my life, but with this particular group, I joined the group in 2010, I believe it was, when it started. And I sang up until 4 years ago when I took over the group as the director.
Chelsea, I want to ask you about being the chosen recipient, and we'll ask Dale a little bit about how that process happens. But you're the director of Young Lives, which is a charity that focuses on young mothers and provides a safety net or some assistance for them. Tell us, will you, just how you got involved in that charity and what it provides?
Yes. So 2 years ago, my daughter, she's at Stetson University and got involved in Young Life. And I just started asking her about it. I went on the website. I was a teen mom myself and saw the area director position for Young Lives and applied. And those, when I was a teen mom who did all the judgment and everything, it was like I can finally use my story to come full circle to help those that really just need love and support.
What was your experience? How does that, what kind of things did you experience that you can see young women needing help with?
Yes, so there's the judgment, there's the stereotype. Most of my girls have been trafficked or raped and it's not just getting pregnant. They have a story, and they truly just need love, support, and somebody there that is going to put their arms around them without the judgment.
Has that gotten any better in recent years?
It has. Actually, the pregnancy rate has declined significantly in the past few years.
I actually met the judgment, or sort of what attaches sometimes to an early pregnancy like that. Do you find that people are less judgmental than they used to be?
I do, especially what's going on in the world today, and people just wanting to step up and help.
Yeah. And so what kind of support do you provide for these women?
So if they're in high school, we really try to get them to graduate, which we had one graduate this year, so made it a very big celebration. We help them with diapers. We help them with the doctor's appointments. We help them with food. I'm teaching 2 of them to learn how to drive right now. Wow. So yes, just anything to basically help them get successful and let them know that this is not the end of their story. There's really good things that can happen.
Yeah. So Dale, how is it that this particular charity, I mean, tell us a little bit about the conceit of doing this summer series and focusing on that benefiting a specific charity. Why did that even come to be?
Well, it's part of our mission. Our mission is not just to bring good choral music to our community, and which I think we do very well. But another part of our mission is to support the community in which we live. And we have supported different charities over the many years that we've been in existence. And our board of directors took a list of suggestions that we might want to consider for this year. And Young Lives just seemed like something that, and there were other ones too, but this one just seemed to be one that we wanted to bring an awareness to our community that these people do exist and they're worthy of support.
And so there are 3 performances coming up, Friday at Hendricks Avenue Baptist Church, Saturday at Arlington Presbyterian Church, and then an afternoon show on Sunday at Riverside Park Methodist Church. What, just very briefly, will people be hearing?
They're going to hear a men's choir first, and then the women's choir follows. That's the way we actually came into existence. And then we combine them all together for a program of about 90 minutes.
All right. Well, we appreciate you coming on today to preview it with us. And thanks for the work that you do, Chelsea Wise, Dale Choate. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
All right. And thank you for listening. We appreciate it. First Coast Connect is produced by Stacy Bennett. Our associate producer is Isabella Casapow. Our production interns are Victoria Jones and Elijah Lott. Our show is directed by Brady Corum, and our theme music is performed by Club de Belugas. Join us tomorrow when we sit down with Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan for our monthly Ask the Mayor segment. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region.